Hey, Shalom Akim. First, almost involved praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bashmi Al-Shai, Bashma Chakudash, double honors under the elders of Parshka Millstone, the elders Green Millstone, and of course, peace and blessings under the hopeful elect, the sincere servants of Yahweh, Bashmi Al-Shai, serving him in truth and sincerity. Yes, on the brother Chayaba from ZMS Plaintables camp. Come back with another lesson through spirit. Yes, so this lesson will be based off of this article from nationalnews.com, which is entitled, it says, UFO deflects U.S. missile in declassified video. Congress demands answers as whistleblowers allege cover-up. And hey, you can see this picture right here. It says, declassified footage shows a U.S. Hellfire missile failing to destroy a glowing orb of Yemen in October 2024, raising questions about superior unknown technology. Yeah, we know exactly what these so-called UFOs are. UFO standing for what? Unidentified flying object. We know exactly what they are. And we know exactly what they are. How? What? According to the scriptures. The scriptures give the exact description of these so-called UFOs. It says 3 military whistleblowers testified under oath that the U.S. government suppresses UAP reports, destroys records, and retaliates against those who speak out. But UAP, of course, stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. And again, well, we know exactly what these are. When we get the scriptures, you know that, of course, what these are the chariots of the Lord. It says, Zechariah chapter 5:1, then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. And he said unto me, what seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof is 10 cubits. Yeah, so a flying roll, which what Zechariah was seeing was a circular object. You know, when he gave the size of it. It says, yeah, flying roll. And of course, a chariot can come in various sizes. How do we know that? Of course, because we know that the chariot, the scriptures speak about how the cloud that Yahushua will come back in. Which what? That cloud is not just a, regular cloud. A white cloud that you see in the sky right now. No, this is a symbolic cloud. This cloud ultimately is symbolic onto a so-called UFO. Again, the prophets, when you go into the chariots, the prophets use various terms. Yeah, chariots, whirlwinds, clouds, and even mountain, when we're about to get right here in 2 Ezra chapter 13. It says 2 Ezra chapter 13 and 6, but I beheld, and lo, he graved himself a great mountain, and flew up upon it. But I would have seen the region or a place whereout the hill was graven, and I could not. Or this other verse 1. So this is a vision given by her that Ezra is giving. It says, and it came to pass after 7 days, I dreamed a dream by night, and lo, there arose a wind from the sea, that removed all the waves thereof. And I beheld, and lo, that man, it said, that man waxed strong with the thousands of heaven. And when he turned his countenance to look, all the things trembled that were seen under him. Of course, that man is going into Yahushai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus. Yahushai, of course, being what? So-called black man. According to Revelation chapter 1 and 14 through 15. You can even start at verse 13. Daniel chapter 10 and 6. What? Both going into the appearance of the Lord. The complete opposite of how Jesus Cesare Borgia looks like. What Jesus goes back ultimately onto Strappus Christus. Strappus Christus. So it says, and after this I beheld, and lo, there was gathered together a multitude of men out of number from the four winds of the heaven to subdue the man that came out of the sea. Or slightly, verse 4 says, and whensoever the voice went out of his mouth, all they burned that heard his voice, like as the earth felleth when it feeleth the fire. This is going into the energy, the energy output that these chariots can emit, which is what high concentrated fire. And when Yahushua gives the command, the chariots are gonna go and do His will. And of course, the thousands of heaven again going into the angels that will accompany Yahushua. So it says that man will act strong with the thousands of heaven, because Yahushua is coming back with his army, with his great army, which is gonna be the many angels. Michael the archangel, and of course going on down. So it says Psalms chapter 68 and 20, or it's likely not 20, but 17, it says, the chariots of the Most High are 20,000, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them, as in Sinai, in the holy place. So yeah, the scriptures speak about how there's 20,000 chariots. And when you go back to the article, it says no known human technology can explain the orb's ability to survive a direct missile strike, according to veterans and lawmakers. See? So Esau can explain this technology. Esau likes to put, again, these so-called UFOs into, his own definitions and his own estimations. But pretty much they were saying in one news report that these so-called UFOs are, pretty much they gave this number. They said it was 1,000 years more advanced than, any type of technology that they have currently. Which again, that's ultimately what the chariots are, infinitely more advanced than, anything that Esau can obtain. Why? Because these are supernatural and spiritual. Esau is carnal. Esau can only operate on a carnal, physical level. These chariots are operating on the spiritual and supernatural level, which far infinitely exceeds, of course, what the physical realm. So it says 2 Ezra chapter 13 and 5, it says, and after this I beheld, and lo, there was that gathered together a multitude of men, out of number from the four winds of the heaven, to subdue the man that came out of the sea. Yeah, of course, that's going into the militaries that are going to try to come against Yahushua. We know that famous speech by Ronald Reagan. Within it, he was saying, if an extraterrestrial force came, wouldn't we all, or basically, wouldn't we all team it together to take it down? And of course, they were referring on to Yahushua, once he makes his return, with his angels. It says, but I beheld, and lo, he graded himself a great mountain and flew up upon it. It says, but I would have seen the region or place whereout the hill was graven, and I could not. Yeah, it says, so, but I beheld, and lo, he had graded himself a great mountain and flew up upon it. But I would have seen the region or place whereout the hill was graven, and I could not. Yeah, because Ezra's liking on it, of course, onto a mountain. Because ultimately Ezra wasn't able to see the ends of it. That's a massive the Lord's chariot is. And again, that's why he likened it onto a mountain. So, but the elder apostle Hor went into pretty much brought up the point. You can go ahead and look up Mount Everest. And, imagine Mount Everest just, randomly up in the sky. And ultimately imagine Yahushua's chariot is going to be even bigger. So it says, and after this I beheld, and lo, all they which are gathered together to subdue him were sore afraid, and yet durst fight. So those are going to be the military, try to fight against Yahushua and the helicopters, the fighter jets, whatever they got, missiles. It says, and lo, as he saw the violence of the multitude that came, he neither lifted up his hand, nor held sword, nor any instrument of war. But it says, but only I saw that he sent out of his mouth, as it had been, a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempest. Yeah, so imagine that. A flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempest. So, what? And again, this isn't Yahushua, literally breathing out of his mouth, fire and sparks and tempests, lightning and, ultimately this Yahushua commanding his chariots the angels, which the angels are going to be piloting those chariots, to emit that energy, the energy beam, which was sparks and tempests going into literal lasers. And of course, the term laser didn't exist back then. So Ezra was using the best terms that he had to describe, these things that he was seeing. It says, verse 11, it says, and they were all mixed together, the blast of fire, the flaming breath, and the great tempest. Yeah, so Ezra was describing, again, this energy output, which when you combine fire, the flaming breath, and a great tempest, you combine all that together, which tempest goes into lightning. Well, obviously that goes, that's pretty much a laser, high power laser. It says, and fell with violence upon the multitude which was prepared to fight, and burned them up every one, so that upon a sudden of an innumerable multitude, nothing was to be perceived, but only dust and the smell of smoke. It's like it says, but only dust and smell of smoke. When I saw this, I was afraid. Yeah, so Ezra was literally seeing, again, it says, so that upon of a sudden an innumerable multitude was, it's like it says, so that upon of a sudden an innumerable multitude, nothing was to be perceived. Yeah, so Ezra literally was literally seeing what these, again, these soldiers, military pilots, whatever, being vaporized. It says, but only dust and smell of smoke. Yeah, what happens when something gets vaporized? It gets turned into nothing. Only dust is left. When I saw this, I was afraid. Yeah, because imagine this. Ezra is seeing something that, he has never saw before. He was literally seeing the future. And, what we're able to see, imagine how these things, we're able to imagine this. I mean, we see this in the movies. Obviously Esau has laser technology, but, we already know it's not going to be on this level, but Esau has laser technology. So imagine, seeing what the type of energy output that these chariots can emit. The type of laser that they'll be able to shoot. It says, going back to the article, so it says by partisan frustration grows over intelligence agencies' refusal to disclose UAP data, even to Congress and past presidents. New legislation may force full transparency as public trust erodes over decades of secrecy and alleged disinformation. Yeah, because Esau doesn't want to show. Ultimately Esau doesn't want to show that he's completely outclassed by these chariots. It says in an extraordinary moment during Tuesday's congressional hearing on unidentified, anomalous phenomena, UAP, lawmakers unveiled a newly declassified military video showing a U.S. Hellfire missile failing to destroy a glowing orb off the coast of Yemen. An event witnesses call scary, unprecedented, and beyond any known human capability. It says the footage recorded by an MQ-9 Reaper drone on October 30, 2024, depicts the 100-pound missile striking the object, only for it to ricochet off before the orb accelerates at speeds no U.S. aircraft can match. The video obtained by Rep. Eric Burleson from an anonymous whistleblower was presented during House Oversight Subcommittee hearing titled Restoring Public Trust Through UAP Transparency and Whistleblower Protection. Yeah, so this is coming out, man. And Esau can't hide ultimately. It says, green light given to engage. Missile appears to be ineffective against the target. Burleson posted on X, formerly Twitter, after the hearing. Says, this is not science fiction. This is a real threat or opportunity that we don't understand. Exactly. So, and I got other scriptures. It says Zechariah chapter 5:1. Then I turned, we just read that. Getting Ezekiel chapter 1. And 4, it says, and I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. And out of the midst of it, it's like it says, and out of the midst thereof, as a color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Yeah. So ultimately, what Ezra is going in, it's like Ezekiel is going into, again, that's the so-called UFO that he saw. It says right here, he described it as a whirlwind, a great cloud. It says, and a fire unfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. Yes, it was super bright. Going back to the article. Yeah, it says, the classified footage shows a U.S. Hellfire missile failing to destroy a glowing orb off Yemen. Yes, a glowing bright orb. See? So the scriptures 100% describe these so-called UFOs. You know what? You can keep on reading, but again, so this is described by Ezekiel. You know, goes into angels, basically the pilots of these chariots, which are the angels. And you know what? The angels, they're able to control. Again, you know, it's not like, you know, the angels are, you know, literally inside of these chariots and moving a joystick. No, ultimately they can be outside of it and inside of it, and they can still control it with just, the spirit, you know, using ultimately just with a thought, they can control the chariots. So no, again, so these are 100% infinitely more advanced than anything that Esau can have, because again, these are operating on a spiritual, you know, heavenly, and a supernatural level. To play this video, you know, brother sent it in the chat. It says UAP sighting shrugs off direct missile hit. I'm not sure if this is the same video I'm not sure if this is the same video, but you know, from that the article is describing. But hey, this is a video that we can play of an example. So playing it. You see it flying. Yeah, and boom. You see the missile just hit it, and then it completely ricochets off the flying object, so-called UFO, and it's still flying. And there's plenty of other videos, man, that go into, and again, you know, there's other videos where the missile hits the chariot, and the chariot doesn't even budge at all. The so-called UFO doesn't even budge. So Esau can send his most powerful missile, and the chariot can just be stationary and won't even flinch. What this video shows, it kind of bounced off a little bit. But hey, it didn't go down, didn't get destroyed. And ultimately, the Lord can show his chariots any way he wants to. So, hey, as the article said, it's completely unheard of. It says no human technology. Yes, it says no known human technology can explain the orb's ability to survive a direct missile strike, according to veterans and lawmakers. See, exactly, because you can explain it. Because again, these are heavenly vehicles created by Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. And of course, these so-called UFOs, they're not just coming back. So we just read in 2 Ezra chapter 13 of how these so-called UFOs are going to be completely vaporizing, the militaries that are going to try to come up against them. And they're going to completely lose. And literally, the Lord's going to have to put a spear on these militaries to fight against them, because the coming of the Lord is going to be so great and powerful that if the Lord didn't put the Spirit upon them, then they would ultimately they wouldn't want to fight. you know what, they'll be in shock and frozen. But the Lord's going to put His Spirit upon them so that He can make, well, ultimately, so the Lord can you know, just like what, or ultimately the Lord's the ultimate director. You know, the Lord wants to show His power, show forth His power. So He's going to put the Spirit upon, you know, these militaries to fight against Him. And not only that, but the chariots are coming back to deliver the elect. You know, we get the various accounts how the scriptures say of how the elect of the nation of Israel, the elect Israelites, the ones serving Yahweh B'Shem Yahshai, ultimately the ones who endure serving Yahweh B'Shem Yahshai unto the end, which what the elect are the predestined ones that will receive salvation. Which of course as brothers hope to be a part of. We understand how the scriptures say about how the elect are going to be beamed up into those chariots to escape the nuclear war, the nuclear destruction that's going to come upon Babylon the Great. So Lord's coming back, to deliver the elect from that nuclear destruction that's going to occur in Babylon the Great. Also, scriptures going to Revelation chapter 7 and 9, the innumerable multitude. So again, Israelites are going to be elect Israelites are going to be being delivered among the whole entire planet. But again, that main deliverance is going to take place in Babylon the Great, which is America, because we know the scripture prophesied the nuclear war that's going to take place. So yeah, these chariots are the vehicles of our salvation that the Lord will send. You can get, Revelation chapter 11. We can get Wisdom of Solomon chapter 5. And many other scriptures going into how, that's how the Lord's going to deliver the elect. It says Luke chapter 21 and 27. It says, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Yeah, again, the Lord's coming back in His chariot. That cloud symbolic unto the chariot. It says verse 28. Yes, a so-called UFO, which is going to be greater, massive, greater than the other so-called UFOs, the other chariots, which the angels will be piloting. It says in verse 28, and when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Yeah, so we're going to be looking up. Of course, Lord's would be part of that. That's what we're waiting for. We're going to be looking up, and we're going to be seeing the chariots. And so that's literally going to be happening. So we're going to be seeing the chariots, Yahushua coming back, the chariots flying, and we're going to be looking up, waiting to be delivered. So yeah, I believe it's the point. Lord, you brothers are edified. Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, B'Shem Kakarash B'Akatham. Shalom.